Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Selby Gardens Fall Lunch in the Gardens, celebrating the Orchid Show 2025, Rebecca Louise Law. My name is Ariane Dart, and I am an advisory committee member of Selby Gardens and co-chair of today's luncheon, along with Katie Hollingsworth. Thank you all for attending this special event. This luncheon supports the vital work of Selby Gardens. Proceeds from the luncheon support our community education programs, international research, conservation, and beautiful world-class horticulture displays. 10 years ago, 3 of Selby Gardens' loyal supporters came together to create the Lunch in the Garden series. So thank you to Jean Widener Goldstein, Terry Hansen, and Margaret Weiss. They brought us a beautiful opportunity to support Selby Gardens, and here we are. So please join me now in welcoming my fellow co-chair, Katie Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Ariane. I'm Katie Hollingsworth, and I'm thrilled to co-chair today's Fall Lunch in the Gardens. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here. Doesn't Selby look great? I would also like to take this time to acknowledge our wonderful sponsors who helped to make today possible. Our continued thanks to the Lunch in the Gardens series sponsor, Charles and Marjorie Bransick Foundation. Our presenting sponsor, my co-chair, Ariane Dart. Our lead sponsors, Audrey Robbins and Carol Lackey. Partner sponsors, Margaret Wise and myself. And our sponsors, Barbara Brisdell, the Community Foundation of Sarasota County, Kim Copeland, Gulf Coast Community Foundation, Arthur S. Karp Family Foundation, Cornelia L. Madsen. And a very special thank you to Better Grow for sponsoring the beautiful centerpieces on our tables. And to our in-kind sponsor, Total Wine and More. The centerpieces are for sale, and a Selby team member will come by to assist you with your purchase. Now would you please join me in welcoming the wonderful Jennifer Romanecki, President and CEO of Selby Gardens, to share a few words with us about this year's Orchid Show.
Hello, everyone. What a crowd. This is fantastic. I think the season has started. So I'm Jennifer Romanecki, President and CEO of Marie Selby Botanical Gardens. And on behalf of our board chair, Catherine Martucci, who's here today, and the rest of our board of trustees, we really want to thank Ariane Dart and Katie Hollingsworth for co-chairing today's luncheon. What a turnout. Thank you both for your fantastic leadership. I also want to add my thanks to the series chairs, Jean Widener Goldstein, Terry Hansen, and Margaret Wise, for all you have done and continue to do for this series. So, yes, a round of applause, absolutely. So, as you know, this year's luncheon celebrates the Orchid Show 2025 Rebecca Louise Law, which is now on view. Presented by Better Grow, the Orchid Show is a beloved annual tradition at Selby Gardens, and it's the first time we're working with a contemporary artist, Rebecca Louise Law, and it's such an honor to have her here with us today. Thank you, Rebecca. So first, I want to begin by recognizing our season sponsors. This dedicated group of loyal champions is generously underwriting our 2025-26 season, and we are very grateful for their support. So deepest gratitude to our presenting season sponsors, Marianne and Bill McComb, Keith Monda and Veronica Brady, Jeannie Russell, Martin and Zelia Trube, the Judith Zuckerberg family, Amicus Foundation, Charles and Marjorie Barancic Foundation, Community Foundation of Sarasota County, the A. Hamilton and Edith T. Gardner Fund at Gulf Coast Community Foundation, Virginia B. Toolman Foundation, and Sarasota County Tourist Development Tax Revenue. Also, many thanks to our lead season sponsors, Ali and Gloria Bahaj, Betsy and Ed Cohen, Arete Foundation, Jean Widener Goldstein, Marcy and Michael Klein, Catherine and Frank Martucci, Cornelia and J. Richard Madsen, Doctors Joel Morganroth and Gail Morrison Morganroth, Audrey Robbins and Harry Leopold, Steinwachs Family Foundation, Hobart and Janice Swan, Marcia Jean Taub and Peter Swain in loving memory of Ethel and Ron Taub, and Pauline L. Wamsler and David J. Sales. A big round of applause. So that long list is very good for Selby Gardens, okay? So before we continue, I'd like to share a very exciting update about the next phase of our master plan for the downtown Sarasota campus. So phase 2 will feature a first-of-its-kind, hurricane-resilient conservatory complex powered with 100% renewable energy, which will display our world-class living research collections of more than 20,000 plants. So phase 2 also includes a new learning pavilion for the 10,000 children and families who visit Selby Gardens annually, as well as new garden features. So drum roll. I am so thrilled to report that the groundbreaking ceremony for phase 2 has now been scheduled for December 2nd of this year. Yeah. Really exciting. So we've already raised over $50 million for this phase, which is 83% of the capital goal. And in total, more than $115 million has now been raised for phases 1 and 2, with 99% coming from private philanthropy. And I did want to recognize our phenomenal phase 2 campaign chairs who are here today, Advisory Committee member Dr. Gail Morrison Morganroth and Trustee Audrey Robbins. Yay. Thank you both. Our deepest gratitude goes to all of you who have already supported this transformational project. And I did want to mention that renderings and more information are in the brochure at your place, and we do hope you will join us on this continued journey. So now, on to the Orchid Show. So as I mentioned, the Orchid Show is an annual tradition at Selby Gardens, and it's the very first time that we've collaborated with a contemporary artist. And we're just so thrilled to have Rebecca Louise Law with us today. Some of you met her when she was here doing the installation and came to the preview of the exhibit. So we're just thrilled to have Rebecca with us. And I'd also like to thank Dr. David Berry, Vice President for Visitor Engagement and Chief Museum Curator, for being a part of today's program and for his leadership in making this exhibition possible. So if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to explore the exhibition after lunch in both the Sandor Museum of Botany and the Arts and our new display conservatory. It is truly incredible. So now I want to invite you to enjoy your lunch, and I will be back shortly to introduce our featured program. Thank you so much. So I hope you're all enjoying your lunch. It sounds like you are, which is wonderful. And before I introduce our featured speaker, I just want to share this short video of the Orchid Show highlighting Rebecca Louise Law's phenomenal artwork comprised of 1.2 million dried flowers and plants in our museum. And then you'll also see the companion display of living orchids that has been put together by Team Selby. So take a look at this short video. Pretty amazing, right? So, of course, I encourage you to walk through Rebecca's installation in the museum after lunch, if you haven't already, which is inspired by Selby Garden's devotion to conservation and the theme of survival. Over the past 20 years, Rebecca has amassed a vast archive of more than 2 million preserved flowers, which she has exhibited across the globe. Her work explores the complexity of our human connection to nature, aiming to inspire a deeper appreciation of the natural world. We are so honored that she is part of this year's Orchid Show and could be with us today. And after her presentation, Rebecca will be in conversation with Dr. David Berry from our team. And then she will host a signing of her book, Life and Death, here in the Event Center with copies available to purchase. So now it's time to turn the program over to Rebecca, so please welcome Rebecca Louise Law.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's been really, really lovely to meet some of you today. And thank you to those as well that I met at the preview. It's been nothing but warm welcome here. And I've really, really appreciated your care for me and my family whilst we were here making the artwork, especially to the Selby team and to David and his team. We really, really did feel like we were part of the family here and that we are part of the family here, so thank you. So I'm going to do a quick talk, hopefully not too quick, but hopefully not too slow, about my art practice. And I know many of you have got a lot of questions for me, and so hopefully this will answer some of those. So I am an installation artist, and I work with flowers, and the space is my canvas. The flowers I see as my paint, and the viewer is my third element. Nothing would be right if I didn't have somebody within one of my artworks. So I live in Wales with my son and my husband, and there's also our cat. And we have a beautiful garden. We've lived there for 7 years, and I do grow my own flowers and dry my own flowers since living there. But we moved to Wales from London. We lived there for 15 years, where I also had my own gallery and lived on a road called Columbia Road, which was very famous and still is very famous for a flower market, which is there every Sunday. So if you ever get to London, go to Columbia Road on a Sunday, because it is really spectacular. And I started my art career at Newcastle University. I did fine art. I went as a painter and printmaker. But as I was making my artworks, I felt very frustrated about working flat and 2D. So I started experimenting in installation art. In 2003, I made my first artwork with just flowers. And at the time, I felt like maybe I'm looking at ephemeral art, maybe I'm looking at decay. I experimented with fresh and dried, but actually I found that my heart lay with preservation and the dried flower, and the value of a dried flower as an art material. This was my studio at university. I would go around to the flower market every week and beg for anything that they were throwing in the bin. I also dried my own flowers that I had grown in an allotment. I don't know if you have allotments here, but in the UK we have these public areas where you can pay a small amount of money to grow your own plants and flowers. So a little about me. I'm the one in the middle. I'm number 4 of 5. I grew up in Cambridge, England. I was wild. I think I spent most of my childhood thinking I was a boy and then realised I wasn't. We were brought up in a fenland area just outside of Cambridge. And my dad was the head gardener of a National Trust property, but next to where we lived was just fields that went for miles and miles and miles, and that was our playground. This is my father, and he was head gardener of Anglesey Abbey, a National Trust property, and we grew up with formal and informal gardens, which were like an extension of our garden and the playground. So I grew up with flowers being controlled and also not controlled because our own garden was wild. My father as well was very much into photography, so he would take us, anytime there was a bloom, he would take us all out as kids to just observe what had happened in nature. And we grew up with observations of nature, so many times we would just lay down in flowers, and this very much influenced my art practice. My father is a 6th generation that we know gardener, so it could go back further, but we haven't gone that far. So every single man in his family were gardeners. My mother grew up on a farm in Cornwall, farmer's daughter, and her mother, my grandmother, always pressed flowers and made artworks with flowers. So my mother was a teacher for rural science and would always teach us the science behind plants and would be very much like my dad into observation of plants. So these are my grandmother's artworks that we grew up with. My grandmother always said, or my nana always said, she's not an artist, she just plays. But she did draw a vase of flowers or paint a vase of flowers every week of her life. So the ancestry on my mother's side goes back to 6 generations as well of artists. This artist in particular was in the Royal Academy, and this was one of his artworks. As you can see, flowers. But actually, I didn't find out about this part of my ancestry until much later on in my art career, so this was quite new to me too. But his father founded the Hornsey School of Art in London, specifically for housewives to get them to make things and create things. So, at university, I was encouraged to look at my ancestry and encouraged to look at who am I? what makes me me, and what do I want to say. So one of the first artworks I made with flowers was called the birthday chair. And my mum, every year of our lives, with me and my siblings, would always put flowers around a chair on our birthdays. So this was one of the first artworks. My degree showpiece was all of the flowers that I'd ever collected, and it made up this huge immersive installation. So after art school, I went into floristry. I needed to earn some money, but I also desperately wanted to understand the world of floristry and flowers in art. It really was a hard transition because I found value in the dried flower. And the dried flower for me was my art material. And the millions of flowers that were thrown away every week in London was so extreme that I found it really hard to work in the industry. But in that time, I learned all about the different styles and history of art with flowers. And I made some really, really amazing friends in the floristry world, which led to me going out and making land art installations with them as well. And I kind of felt very passionate about showing people what you could make of what you have. So I made some artworks out in the wild. This is in Italy, actually. And then I started working as artist in resident for the National Trust and working with school children and adults, just using what we have and what we could find and making artworks with it. But then I kind of ran ahead of myself and felt like floristry wasn't for me. I'd learned a lot, made amazing friends in London, but I needed to do my art. So I didn't have a gallery, and I just felt like I needed to make, and I started using the street as my gallery. So every week I would go round to florists, all my friends, and say, what are you throwing away? I'd get whatever waste they had and make art. So I started asking anyone if they had any spaces. So I would make art in any space that was available. And this was at a Chelsea Flower Show in London. So the RHS, whenever they had a commercial space that hadn't been filled, they'd phone me up and say, Rebecca, do you want to fill it and do an artwork? So I did. I got well known in the east of London for being that mad, crazy woman that goes out onto the street with dead flowers. But that reputation also meant that brands started to see who I was and commission artworks. So this was my first massive commission by Hermes in the Royal Opera House in London. And I continued. This was at the Royal Academy. At the time, many people didn't understand the value of a flower dried. So this was a really, really hard time for me. I would put up an artwork, and then at the Royal Academy, they said it had to come down within 3 days because nobody would understand it. So then I took it to the street, of course. It felt for me, if they don't get it yet, that's fine, they will eventually. But everything for me felt like it needed to live for longer than what the floristry world was telling people. I got commissioned to do an artwork at the Garden Museum in London. And there they said they would allow it to hang for as long as they could get away with it. The director there said, oh, it'll probably be up for about a week, maybe 3. But it actually went on to be there for about 3 months, which was at the time groundbreaking for me because it was the first time that anyone appreciated the flowers beyond fresh. And of course, I took it down and made another artwork with it. And these flowers are here today. So anything that I have made, I've collected and saved. So no matter what artwork I make, it continues to be part of my collection. So that is why I have over 2 million flowers now today. This piece was called The Hated Flower. I self-funded a show because I wanted people to really experience and understand my work as a whole at that point where I was at. Again, I never waited for a gallery, I just did it. So I made this artwork where people could experience the flowers drying. The reason I called it The Hated Flower was at the time in floristry, everyone didn't like the carnation and the chrysanthemum. And I just didn't get it. So I just thought I'd have a bit of a joke with that plant and actually try and show people more of appreciation for them. So I also worked on an installation at Kew Gardens, and there I was lucky enough to be shown Egyptian garlands, which were thousands of years old. And it really was incredible for me to see a preserved plant that was that old, when I had been for years trying to explain that flowers can last a long time. So this was really an incredible moment for me to look at the Egyptian collections and the burial garlands and see how long a flower can last, which also is a realization that my collection will probably outlast me. This is how I have packed the flowers. And many of you ask, how does it work? So these boxes are called coffin boxes, which is not very nice, but they are kind of 3 foot by 1 foot boxes. And most of my collection is in these boxes, where we will lay down the garland and then lay tissue over the top. And it really is as simple as that. It really matters to me where the flowers come from. So we always will research where we're getting our plants from. The cut flower industry, especially in Europe, it can be very, very toxic and complicated with some of the treatment of the people that work on the farms. And I don't get involved with that at all. I'll either grow flowers at my own garden, or we will visit the flower farms where the flowers are being grown. I really enjoy involving community, and some of you here will have helped to make some of the garlands for this artwork. For me, I got to a point where I didn't want to employ freelancers to work with me to make the garlands for exhibitions. I wanted to share that process because I felt like people wanted to be a part of the process of making art, and I could share that. So I've involved community now for nearly 10 years, and it's been incredible. So as well as my hands in that artwork, you can see is many hands from all over the world, which I think makes it extremely valuable. We often involve school children as well. And also for me, it breaks down the barriers of art, the intimidation of art. If you involve people in the process, then they might more likely walk through the door of a gallery or a museum or an institution. So I've made artworks in the UK, Europe, all over the world, Australia, Asia, and America, many places in America. I have to say I've felt really supported by the American people with my art practice. I haven't had to over-explain it. I feel like the American audience have always got it, so I appreciate that. Thank you. So this artwork that you see here, it came from a collection of about, here it was a little bit less than 1 million flowers got sent out to the Toledo Museum of Art, where we created an artwork called Community. And then it went from there to the Frederick Meyer Sculpture Garden in Grand Rapids, where we added a whole other layer of flowers from there. And then it went to Jacksonville, where some of you may have seen the artwork called The Journey. And from there, it went to Hawaii, to Honolulu, where I made an artwork called Awakening, which was huge, by the way. You can't really tell from there, but it just went round a corner. And that is where you'll see some of the most incredible plants that are in this artwork here today. So I also talked about the plastic waste in Hawaii that was being washed up on the beaches there. So if any of you kind of take closer looks at some of the garlands, you might see a tiny bit of plastic in there. And that's because we were talking about the waste that was being washed up onto the beaches in Hawaii. So then it came here. And here we have the artwork called Survival. And we looked at many kind of ways of working with this space. It is a domestic space. It's very different to the museums and galleries. So I always felt like it should be a cabinet of curiosity to really observe those flowers that I have collected over the years. This is David. And David has been in conversation with me since the Cummer Museum in Jacksonville, where we've looked at the space, revisited it time and time again, but we finally got here. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and I've really appreciated it. But yeah, David and I are going to have a little chat now. Thank you.
I was the one on the right in the photograph. I was reminded earlier I should introduce myself. I am David Barry. I'm the Vice President for Visitor Engagement and the Chief Museum Curator here. And Rebecca, it is a great pleasure to have you here, have you back. The first question, I guess, you mentioned the theme of survival as it relates to our show. What inspired that choice of subject for the installation at Selby Gardens?
So when I first came here, the herbarium was what I was blown away by, because I just love the preservation of plants and flowers, and then also the living collection. And I had many meetings and conversations with the botanists and horticulturalists here. And what fascinated me about the plants, and especially the orchid, was survival. And I thought that that was incredible, that these flowers exist because they need to survive. The plant needs to survive. So that word came to mind. But then, over the years, especially last year, you had the horrific hurricanes coming through. And in terms of people, that word felt like it was very strong too, especially with this land and Florida, and what you guys have managed to do. I mean, I still can't get over how beautiful it looks, considering what happened last year. And I think you've done an incredible job with just restoration and preservation of this place. And yeah, so survival felt like it had many layers, but ultimately it came from the plant and the reason for a flower.
That's a wonderful explanation. Being the non-plant guy in the group, I'm also amazed at what my colleagues accomplish as I stand there and watch them labor out and then go into my air-conditioned office. Just to explain, it may be clear to everybody, but the herbarium that you mentioned, Selby Gardens is a scientific institution. We have a living plant collection. Some of those materials are for the purposes of display. Some are to support scientific research. But supporting the work on the living plant is preserved material and bibliographic material, so library collections, books, prints, those types of things. But the preserved collection is the herbarium, so pressed and dried plants, of which we have about 145,000 specimens, and then our spirit collection, which are the plants and preservative fluids. So we use these for scientific research, and I think both Rebecca and certainly I was struck by the parallels between preservation as it plays out in the case of an art installation, and preservation as an important step in scientific discovery and research. I want to take a second and talk a little bit about process. You have described, and I think it's the most eloquent possible way to communicate this idea of sort of painting with flowers. And it was fascinating to me, again, watching other people do the hard work as the installation took shape in the galleries. There is a sort of route that you laid out and then a kind of layering of material. And it was fascinating each day to kind of watch it take shape. And I was wondering if you could explain a little bit the thinking that underlies that.
Yeah, so knowing the way that everyone would walk into that space, I did want an element of surprise. And I know, Jennifer, you say, oh, everyone goes, wow, like when they walk into the second space. It is intentional. I love to have layers in the artworks, but I do see it as painting. So I look at the whole space as a canvas, and I suppose that means that I basically do see in 3D rather than in 2D, and I have a sense of space. I work with the more lighter tones and the browns first, as if it's like priming a canvas, and then I work with the brighter tones last. So I put those through. But in a sense, I saw this artwork as very linear. I wanted it to be connected to the ceiling and just about the floor. I saw it as creating a line drawing, which you may see or you may not see, but a line drawing that people would walk through. So, yeah, for me, I see it like painting, and I do still paint. I just don't really show them. So I kind of feel like the training of painting is there, and coming to it from a painterly place is there. But yeah, that's kind of my thinking when I walk into that space.
I have a feeling if you did want to go back to exhibiting your painted works, I think I know a gallery that might be interested, and an audience that might be receptive to it. The works are site-specific installations. They're sort of created anew with each new location. And obviously, it responds to the physical environment, but I think there's also, and that your choice of theme is an illustration of this, the work is responsive to the organization and its mission and its purpose. What has stood out to you the most about your experience working with the team here at Selby Gardens?
I feel really protected here by the science and botany. I think it feels like I'm having a hug for a moment in my art practice, because I've spent, as you could see, many years talking about the value of a dried flower. And this is the first place where I've really felt like I'm embraced by that. Mainly through your collection, but I think everyone here who works at Marie Selby understands the value of a dried flower and understands the herbarium. So firstly, that I feel like thank you for giving me a warm, safe place for a moment. But the Marie Selby team is just so special. I love how every single department gets on so well. I mean, I've just had such a nice time working with every single department, and I feel like it's unique, actually. I often will go into an institution and say, right, let's all come together and do the community, do education, do collecting of flowers, all of the different areas. And sometimes there will be one department that doesn't really want to. And that's okay, so we just kind of rethink it. But here, that was not the case at all. It was incredible. It felt like a community that came together to make this artwork, and a true collaboration. Yeah, so I'm extremely proud of what your team here have given me.
That means a lot. And the organization is highly collaborative. I mean, everything we do is that way. And you referenced community engagement. so that our audience understands, we did a series of workshops in the 2 weeks leading up to the opening of the installation that involved volunteers, that involved staff who were fed with pizza. It's pizza and coffee is really at the root of collaboration. And then a number of community partners, youth serving organizations that we work with, came in and helped assemble some of those strands that got integrated into the work. And we are very grateful to Rebecca and her team for making that opportunity possible and for facilitating that. It really is collaboration is an integral part of what we do, and I have experienced that coming from a background in the arts. I hear myself on tours talk about plants, and I'm like, who is that person? And where does that come from? Because that's not my background, but it is a great privilege to work with people whose mission is plant science and plant conservation. We've talked a little bit about some of your upcoming projects. So would you be willing to share a future project that most excites you and give us a little sense as why?
Yeah, so some of you know that I was here and then I went away and then I came back again. And it was because I had a commitment to an art institution in North Germany, where we've been working with the community there for over a year now. And I have an exhibition in an area called Schleswig-Holstein in the north of Germany on the borders of Denmark. And I have an exhibition which is going to be in multiple museums and multiple spaces, and probably the biggest exhibition of my life. It will be up for a year, and it has definitely 4 huge installations and then other artworks alongside it. So they did say to me last week, what do you feel about saying retrospective? But I am only 45, so I'm a bit like, yeah, that's okay. But I am still, like, I hope I've got a few more years. So, yeah, but it'll be exciting. It's a really, really big deal. I think I hadn't necessarily grasped how big a deal it was until last week. But what is incredible as well with that piece is it has got community involvement that has been going on for over a year now. So those groups of wiring teams and foragers are extremely close. They've become a community in themselves. They call it toodling, which is twiddling. So they've even made up their own name for the process, which is kind of interesting too. But yeah, so that's quite an exciting piece that's happening next.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I think we're getting close to the end of our time and still a book signing to go. I want to thank you. This has been a 4-year collaboration, and it has been an extraordinary one, certainly one on a personal level that is right at the top of the list for me, so I am tremendously grateful. Thank you for trusting us with this extraordinary work of art next door, and for enabling us to share it with our community. Thank you for coming back to participate today, and I want to thank the audience for your support of Selby Gardens, for being here, and for all you do to support the arts and culture here at Selby and in Sarasota. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Rebecca, thank you so much for that incredible insight into your work. I mean, you could hear a pin drop in this room. I think everyone is just riveted and fascinated. So thank you so much for this collaboration. It's just been incredible. So I also want to thank once again our co-chairs, Ariane Dart and Katie Hollingsworth. Thank you both so much for your leadership. And we remain deeply grateful to our fabulous series chairs, Jean Widener-Goldstein, Terry Hansen, and Margaret Wise. And a big thank you to our loyal series sponsor, Charles and Marjorie Barancic Foundation, for your phenomenal support. Thank you so much. So as you heard, Rebecca will be in the back of the room signing copies of her book, which we're selling in the back as well. And also, if you would like to purchase the orchids on the table, staff members will be coming around to help you, to assist you. And lastly, final reminder, if you haven't been in to see Rebecca's installation, you must do so. So you just head right out here and head to the right and enter the museum to really immerse yourselves in an incredible, one-of-a-kind experience. So the Orchid Show is on through December 7th. We encourage you to come back often. And in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us today and for your phenomenal support of Selby Gardens. Thank you so much.